though an individual is strong, but banding together with other like-minded individuals makes you even stronger, and also encourages you to develop your own thoughts and actions.
This is Cold War Conversations. If you're new here, you've come to the right place to listen to first-hand Cold War history accounts. Do make sure you subscribe in your podcast app so you don't miss out on future episodes. Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp was a protest camp established in 1981 to protest against the deployment of US Air Force-controlled ground-launched nuclear-armed cruise missiles at RAF Greenham Common. On the eve of International Women's Day 2021, I talked with Jan Castro-Fraser, who chose to challenge the existence of nuclear weapons during the Cold War. We talk about her experiences at Greenham Common Peace Camp and other demonstrations in the 1980s, as well as how her experiences in the peace movement changed her, empowered her, and made her who she is today. If you're enjoying the podcast, you can show your support via a monthly donation of $4, £3 or €3 via Patreon. Plus, you get the sought-after Cold War Conversations drinks coaster as a thank you, and bask in the warm glow of knowing that you are helping to preserve Cold War history.
Hi, this is Tree from Berlin. I decided to support Cold War Conversations with a monthly subscription for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I really enjoyed the podcast. We moved to Berlin as we were really interested in Cold War history, and it was good to live in the city with lots of constant reminders of it. And secondly, I believe it's so important and interesting to hear these stories from that period, good and bad. Books will tell you so much, but the real life stories from people who were there make it so real. Sometimes you feel like you are there experiencing these times in history. It's important to hear these tales, and I want to support this.
If you want to support us, just go to coldwarconversations.com/donate. If a financial contribution is not your cup of tea, then you can still help us by leaving written reviews wherever you listen to us, as well as sharing us on social media. It really helps us get new guests on the show. I am delighted to welcome Jan to our Cold War conversation.
Very middle class, but daughter of a regimental sergeant major who, when he came out of the army, became a very successful businessman. It was in Bournemouth, quite privileged. I went to private all-girls school. Was really meant to grow up to be a young lady and toe the line.
Right. So that didn't go very well then.
No. I think my father was none too pleased with me a lot of the time.
How did you first become involved in peace activism? Was it like a political route?
Yes, I moved away from home when I started my nurse training, and then I moved up to Oxford once I qualified, and I joined, it was called the Wallingford Peace Group, but it was part of the wider Oxford Peace Group, and I did it purely because of the bomb situation, really. Nothing else political. I wasn't aligned to the Labour Party. In fact, I've voted Conservative all my life. So I wasn't aligned to the Labour Party or anything like that. It was merely my concerns about housing American bombs in our country.
Was it around the control of the weapons or the potential impact of the nuclear weapons as well?
Both. The impact, of course, yes, because I used to demonstrate on Hiroshima and Nagasaki Day. So, yes, the impact, the worry about that, and the worry how much control we had over these bombs that were situated at Newbury.
Yeah, because I remember at the time there was a lot of argument in the papers and in society about a dual key option, wasn't there? Around who actually controlled the launch of these missiles.
Yes, that's right, yes. Well, I wasn't happy with anyone controlling the launch, actually. I just didn't want them there at all.
What was the first demonstration that you went on? Can you remember that?
I think it was probably local to Oxford before I went to Greenham Common. I think it was just probably a small local one in the Market Square at Wallingford, yeah. And then progressed on to greater things, if you like.
Did you go on any of the large ones down in London?
I did go to London, one outside the American Embassy, and I went to Fastlane as well by coach from Oxford.
Right.
A hired coach, not a commercial, trip out. We hired a coach and we all went.
At that point, were you taking part in non-violent direct action, or were you just demonstrating?
Well, the American Embassy one involved sitting on the floor and being dragged away by police officers and going back and sitting down. So I don't know whether you call that demonstration or non-violent action, but it wasn't just standing there and demonstrating. The fascinating one, I think it was just standing and demonstrating, placards and things like that, yeah.
Yeah, I would call the American Embassy non-violent direct action, I think, if there's a direct police intervention like that. But then we're getting into technicalities. Can you describe the first time you visited Greenham and what you saw?
Yeah, it was we always went on a Friday night because we were professional working women. I don't mean we were on the streets. I mean we had professions. So we were all teachers, nurses, that sort of woman. Some married with children, some not. So it was always a Friday night we went. And the first time I went, I think we went to Orange Gate, which I really can't remember. So all this now so clearly. There was one side of Greenham that would have no men at all, and the other side were a bit more liberal, and they would allow men to visit but not stay the night. And we went to that side of the gates because really the other side was not even very welcoming to us as weekend stayers. I don't know. I presume they thought we were, only half involved because we weren't living there all the time. But the side that we went to, those gates along that side were much more welcoming to us, welcomed what we brought and the fact that we're different people to discuss and take action with. So I didn't go to the very militant side. I went to the other side.
Your politics must have been quite interesting because I would have thought, being of conservative hue, that was relatively unusual in the peace movement.
I think it probably was, but I wasn't a very political animal, I have to say. I mean, I wasn't a strong Tory. I just voted for them because, on the whole, they suited my lifestyle better.
I'm just imagining, discussions around the campfire on a Friday night.
I didn't tend to speak about who I voted for.
Yeah, you're probably in quite a minority there.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
What were the living conditions like in the camp?
We used to fundraise for them, and we used to take, the Gore-Tex sleeping bags and the tents for them. But then the bailiffs would just take them away when they came. Mostly, I don't think I slept very much while I was there. I actually was round the campfire most of the time and let the women who lived there all the time, go to sleep knowing that there were other people keeping their eye open for them. Did
they have much trouble then at the camp overnight sometimes?
Yes, the bailiffs, yes. They would do a swoop and just gather up everything. So we needed to be there to let them have a sleep, knowing there were people watching, and if the bailiffs came, we would grab as much as we could and wake them up.
Because it was common land, wasn't it? So technically it was an illegal encampment.
Yeah.
How did your family feel about your activities?
My father was furious, especially when he saw me on television, which was a couple of times. He was absolutely furious about the whole thing. Mother tended to support whatever I chose to do because she hadn't had the chance to really follow what she believed in. Because of her position in society and because of when she was growing up. It was far more rigid roles for women then.
Yeah, I'd completely understand. A far more patriarchal structure. And
then she married a man who was very controlling, of course. So she didn't say much, but I think I got the feeling that she was encouraging me silently, but she was rubbing her hands in glee as well.
While you were there over the weekends, what were you doing in order to protest?
Well, various different things. Depends what was going on. Quite often they do a dummy run in the middle of the night, as in pretending to move missiles. And then the police would be there moving us all out of the way in order for them to come through the gates and then back in again so many hours later. So there was that going on. So we took part in that, of course we did. And there was a lot of defacing the wire and also destroying the wire. And there was a lot of speaking to the soldiers, the other side of the wire, to get their views on things. That was always very interesting, talking to some of the soldiers. And they weren't particularly anti. I mean, obviously some were, but some quite liked having a conversation about it. And other things, like where they'd be, what minor war zones they'd been in, things like that,
So they were okay communicating with you. I would have thought their orders would have been to have not spoken to you, or
probably. I don't know what their orders were, but of course, if they were out at a gate, guarding the gate, nobody knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And we'd be stood, up against the wire having a conversation, and nobody would actually know.
So some of them did sort of intimate that they were sympathetic to your cause.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, some were sympathetic. Some were not sympathetic but interested. Well, the ones who weren't sympathetic, of course, wouldn't have spoken to us.
Yeah.
So, we only spoke to the ones who were sympathetic or interested.
These were British soldiers, because I presume the US Air Force element were sort of kept quite a way away from the fence.
Yes, it was British guarding the gates, yes.
When they did these test cruise missile deployments, were you communicating with other peace activists as well to get them to follow the convoys?
No, I don't remember that, no.
I did read somewhere, or I've seen a video on YouTube about a group called Cruise Watch, who used to follow the convoys. Don't remember that, I'm afraid. No, that's fine. That's fine. There was a lot of communication with the police on the times they brought the pretend missiles out and brought them back in. A lot of communication with the police, and none of it very friendly. A lot of being dragged about and thrown into ditches and things like that, Were the police quite violent with you at times? Not, more patronising, like, come along, young lady, you can't sit there. That type of. But there was one particularly violent incident that I put in a report about. I put in a complaint and a report about a particularly violent incident. And so I had to be interviewed and everything about that as well. But I presumed that it was because I was a senior ward sister living in a village in Oxfordshire that they took any notice of it. If it had been one of the Greenham women who lived at Greenham who'd put in a complaint, I don't think there would have been so much notice taken of my complaint. What were the circumstances of that incident that made you complain? Another girl who was with me, again, a professional woman, a nurse, she and I were dragged out of my car, because we'd gone by car. We were dragged out of my car and thrown into ditches. And she was actually quite heavily pregnant. And
they could see she was. I mean, when somebody's heavily pregnant, it's not very well disguised, is it? They could see she was. We were both dragged out of the car and thrown into a ditch.
And did the police respond to your complaint at all?
Yes, oh yes. Well, it was all sort of nice. They obviously sent the best PR guy, and he was very assuring that he'd look into it, and then I got a letter afterwards that, he'd looked into it and he'd spoken to the police concerned and all the rest of it. But who knows? But at least I felt that I should complain about it.
Were you there when the demonstration with the 14-mile human chain?
Yes.
That must have been quite a spectacular day.
Yes, it was. And I was also there when the women were on the silos. Yeah,
I've seen photos of that where they're dancing on top of the bunkers.
Yes. So I was there then, and I was also a lot of days when everybody was gathered there. We were always pinning things to the wire, and things like that. So I was there for a lot of friendly demonstrations that were all about unity.
I know that singing was a very big part of the demonstrating as well. I'm not going to ask you to sing any of the songs, but can you still remember those?
No, I can't. I really can't. All I can remember is the Indian noise we used to make, with the fingers in our mouths. Right, pin back your ears. That.
Right.
Loads of that going on.
What was that intended to do, I guess I'm going to ask?
I think it was a unity thing, that we'll all make this noise. We'll start here, and it's a bit like a Mexican wave, and it'd go all the way round. Yeah, a unity thing. Yeah, we did used to do singing in Wallingford Market Square, the Peace Group, in order for fundraising. And at the same time, we used to sing at the miners' strikes.
Was that a bit of a contradiction around your politics or not?
Yes, it was a contradiction. Although I was there to support the women and the children of the miners, and it was just, I don't know, it just seemed right to do it, to go and entertain them, by singing and and taking them things, of course, as well. I mean, we were there to take food and money and things.
And as far as the sort of maintenance of the peace camp, this was, as you sort of described, with people coming with food or tents or clothing and being supported by peace groups from around the country.
And because we were local, we were able to go every Friday. I didn't go every Friday, but some people from our group went. So there was people there every Friday. And I'm more than ever convinced, since I've said it to you, that it was Orange Gate that we supported. Because the gates were named by the colours of the rainbow. Because, our motto was the colour of the rainbow, the peace group's motto.
Yes. Yeah, I was aware that was sort of like the emblem.
Yeah, and we used to wear, jumpers that had been knitted in the colours of the rainbow, and hats and gloves and things like that to keep us warm at night. But I'm pretty sure it was Orange Gate that we supported.
Okay, open the Wikipedia page, which is not always correct. It says the first camp was called Yellow Gate, and then Blue Gate had a New Age focus, Violet Gate was religious, and Green Gate was women only, which is probably the one you've described before. What was the reaction of the locals to Greenham Common?
That I don't know. Never saw any locals at all. I have no idea. It must have devalued their houses, but I don't know. The only time I ever saw people from around that area was when we were in court at Newbury.
I'm presuming that you did get arrested.
Oh, yeah.
How many times?
6-ish.
On those occasions, what were they charging you with? Was it obstruction of the highway?
obstruction or damage.
When you were arrested, where did they take you?
To Newbury Nick, and we all sat, in one of the cells there, and we were up in court the next day.
Right, so an overnight stay in...
Yeah, they got us through pretty quickly.
Right.
In and out. And, of course, the Labour Party were paying the fines of the women. And I wouldn't have the Labour Party pay my fines. And I paid my own fines. I can remember my father saying to me, and if you get arrested, don't look to me to pay your fines. And I said, oh, Father, I've already been arrested a couple of times. I've paid my own fines.
I can't imagine his reaction, but I've sort of got some idea.
Steam coming out of his ears. I actually got arrested also in Wallingford Town Centre. This is bizarre as well. My friend and I decided we were going to make Wallingford sit up and notice that it was, I can't remember if it was Hiroshima or Nagasaki Day, one of them. We made stencils of me laying in poses of being dead. And we went in the middle of the night before the day and painted all these on the pavements outside some of the bigger shops, like Waitrose and places like that, booths of dead people in black on the pavements. So there was uproar the next morning. And then the next night, we went, because we were quite responsible citizens, we went to scrub them off the next night in the middle of the night and got arrested scrubbing them off. It's bizarre, isn't it?
What was the charge then? Still criminal damage?
No, they just took us and gave us a severe talking to. They said that they would speak to the shopkeepers, and if they wanted to press charges, then they would notify us. But of course they weren't going to, were they? So we just had a bit of a talking to.
When you were up in Newbury Court, I presume it was magistrates' court, wasn't it?
Yeah, magistrates, yes.
Was anybody defending you?
Not me personally, no. But I don't know about all the occasions, but not me personally, and not the group that I was with, no.
Did any of the group that you were with or yourself make any speeches in court in terms of mitigation for what you'd done? Oh,
yes, we were voicing our beliefs, yes.
And you did that as well?
Yes, I did that as well. Why, told them why I was doing it, and why I thought I was right and they were wrong. But it wasn't rowdy. It was very civilised.
Yeah.
It was very civilised.
They agreed to disagree.
Yeah, that sort of thing, yeah. Issued us with a, £75 fine or whatever, and off you go, don't do it again, there's a good little girl type thing. The main thing I remember is being patronised such a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's, as you've said before, the 1980s was a different time. Women were still seen as
homemakers.
Yeah, homemakers, and I can completely understand your mother seeing in you almost like, gosh, I wish I'd had those sort of opportunities, and I really want to give my daughter as much support as I can to fulfill her opportunities and to be independent.
Yes, and she'd been like that through my life with my education and things like that as well. Unbeknownst to my father, she'd paid for one of my degrees.
Right. Looking back at Greenham and the peace movement, do you think it achieved anything?
No, I don't actually. Well, on a minor scale, if you like, because it made women band together and fight for what they believed in or didn't believe in. And so, yes, on individuals, I think it had a great impact emotionally and psychologically, maybe even intellectually. But in the grander scheme of things, no, I don't think we achieved. Well, we did achieve what we wanted to achieve, but I don't think it was because of us.
Obviously, you publicised the fact that these weapons were in the UK and how they were going to be used, because the peace camp did generate a lot of publicity. But I think what you're also saying there is the women who demonstrated there or lived there or became involved with the peace camp were more empowered as a result of that, and realising, the strength of their own views and that their voice can be heard. Yes,
though an individual is strong, but banding together with other like-minded individuals makes you even stronger, and also encourages you to develop your own thoughts and actions. And I'm sure, although I've never had children, I'm sure it had an impact on the children of the women of my generation who were there.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how many descendants of those, both women and men who protested, obviously away from Greenham, are now involved in, protest movements now, such as, the environmental movement.
I think, well, personally, I think it never leaves you. The fact that you've done it and you've felt that you've done the right thing, and you felt elation and you felt the comradeship and all the rest of it, that actually never leaves you, and you carry on looking for things to fight their cause. Perhaps not to such an extent as we did at Greenham, but nevertheless stand up and say your bit for other causes that need you to.
I think you're right. Once somebody's done that, then you're not going to accept certain situations that you perhaps might have done previously.
No. And although I was a successful woman before I went there, I went on to be a much more successful woman and able to fight the corner for other people.
So you feel that it also delivered you personal growth?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, I think without having been involved in Greenham rather than the peace group, without having been involved in Greenham, I don't think I would have ended up the person that I have ended up. And the other thing that I have always said was that I didn't want children before I went to Greenham and took part in the wider peace groups. I didn't particularly want children, but I might have done. But that finished it totally when I saw the type of world I might be bringing them into. And I have never regretted that, and even now I say I am so glad I never had children, because what type of world are we leaving to them?
I've heard that as well, as one of their motives for joining peace movements is the thought of what the world is going to be for their children and what the future's going to be. So that it definitely resonates with a lot of people as to why they get involved in activism, and it also echoes forward through to environmental activism as well.
Yes, absolutely, yes, and and I do. I am aware of environmental issues, and much more than a lot of the people I know. My conscience is much more attuned to what we're doing to the environment and what we're leaving to other people than even people I know who have got children. They don't feel as strongly about it as I do. To the point of me saying to them, I'm really glad I don't have children, or more so grandchildren, because what on earth are we leaving for them? And some people look at me as though I'm balmy, sort of like, it obviously hasn't occurred to them.
Have you got friends now that you still had when you were involved in the peace movement?
No, I haven't, because I moved around the country with my career, so no, I haven't.
Do many of your current friends know about your 1980s activities?
Yes, I've never made any secret about it at all. Yes, I would say most probably know.
It must be a interesting conversation piece with
yes,
people.
Especially with some of my friends' daughters. When I talk about what I've done in my life, there are other things that people would think, oh, I got fancy doing that. But and when I speak to them, they're amazed and interested, and I hope I give them food for thought. That's
interesting that they're interested in the history of women's protests and want to hear about your experiences. I mean, presumably when you say to them that you were arrested 6 times, that their eyes widen.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's, what, AJ? Tell me more, because they all call me AJ. AJ, tell me more. And they are interested in it, yes.
Yeah.
And other things that I've done that haven't been particularly legal that I tell them about. In fact, some things that have been very illegal that I tell them about. And they've always been interested to know, why and, what it was like and, that sort of thing, So I've never, ever been shy about talking about my past and my convictions.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm appreciating your honesty and talking with me on the podcast. Did you ever enter onto the base? Did you ever go through the wire?
No, I didn't. No. I never had that opportunity. Although we were snipping the wire, I never snipped a hole big enough for me to go through.
So if the opportunity had have been there, you would have gone onto the base?
Oh, yes. Yes, I would.
If you'd gone into a highly restricted area, the US Air Force were armed, weren't they? If somebody said stop or I fire, you would definitely stop.
Yes, I would have stopped, yes. Oh, yes, not endangering life and limb. That would have been futile. Well, I suppose I could have been a martyr, but even so, futile.
Yeah. If you look back over 30 years back to your time at Greenham, or 40 years almost.
40 years, yes.
What would you say were the most memorable moments?
I think the police brutality, that was a memorable moment. The women dancing on the silos was very memorable. And just the joy of being there and feeling that you're helping these women who are spending all their lives there. And also being in a position to do so, just the emotional feeling of being able to help people and being in a position to help people.
Did you feel that you were, part of history there when you were there at the time?
Not at the time, but when I look back on it, yes. Yeah, at the time it was just, you got to do what you got to do. But when I look back on it now, and especially now because I've done probably about 4 interviews now about it, now I think probably more important than I felt it was at the time.
Yeah. I guess that feeling of camaraderie and power of women, being together protesting would, you'd never forget that feeling. No,
definitely not.
Is your feeling about nuclear weapons the same now?
Yes, absolutely, yes, the same. And I would do it all over again now if I had to.
That's a great line to end it on, Jan. I'll definitely keep that one in. And we have further information such as videos and links in our show notes, which will show as a link in your podcast app. Now, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast without the generous support of our patrons. However, I want to especially thank our Politburo level members who are contributing a generous $30 a month to keep us on the air. They are Tony Sowards, Sam Hardwick, Nicholas Butter, Jeffrey Jones, Matthew Comstock, Frederick Esposito, Jack Madwed, Mark Libantz, and Peter Ryan. Don't forget, if you like one of those Cold War Conversations coasters and help support the show, then head over to coldwarconversations.com/donate. If you can't wait for the next episode, please visit our Facebook discussion group where listeners just like you continue the Cold War conversation. Just search for Cold War Conversations in Facebook. Thank you very much for listening. It is really appreciated. Goodbye.